So we've got a big topic on the EPA's recent ruling, the AIM Act, that was published September 20th. And the goal of this legislation is to reduce HFCs by 85% by 2036. There has been, CO2 adoption in Europe. Now a lot of CO2 adoption and goals now in the US, with some challenges, the older systems in Europe with the higher pressure and maintenance, and even having the maintenance forces. And a lot of good, I've seen North American Sustainability Refrigerant Council doing lots of programs for technicians so that they get up to speed. I guess a question for Keely is about CO2. How will this regulation support or not support CO2?
Well, I don't think this particular part of the regulations is what's going to drive people into CO2. I think that's more the technology transitions rule, where as of certain dates in all of the various equipment sectors that we do business in, it's going to be illegal to use refrigerants with GWPs usually greater than 150. That varies depending on the sector. But I think that's what's going to drive people into not just CO2, but also propane. I think we're definitely going to see a modular approach to switching to CO2 and propane. The part in the technology transitions rule where your existing equipment, if you make certain changes to it, you turn it into new equipment, and all of a sudden you have to use these very low GWP refrigerants, I think is going to lead people, instead of expanding existing rack systems and existing equipment, they're going to move more to CO2 condensing units or propane self-contained units, as opposed to trying to expand their HFC rack systems. Certainly using propane and CO2 gets you out of the chronically leaking appliance reporting requirements in the emissions reduction and reclamation rule. Certainly you don't have to worry about the compliance and enforcement dangers inherent in that regulation if you move to a refrigerant that is not regulated, right? So in that sense, that in and of itself is a motivation to move to these refrigerants that are not covered by this regulation that we're talking about today.
Thank you for that. And Ron, on CO2, what's your thought?
I think the technology is excellent, and it's as it continues to evolve for our different temperature zones that we have, and the extreme heat in the summer and the extreme cold in the winter, and new build. It's a great technology. It's a great thing. And stores like our existing fleet, we've got stores that have 6 HFC racks that are running in there. So to replace the rack, all the piping, all of the cases, you're taking almost the entirety of the inside of that shell and replacing it. So it's almost a gut and refresh, plus you have downtime. So in order to not upset customers and send them to competition or lose the sales that are paying for the work, then you're looking at case rentals and more electrical supply to run the case rentals that are there. And the costs just continually rise the more you look into converting existing. So I think that the technology with individual condensing units and the size of condensing units that are available will really help, because you can take, for instance, a deli department, take that off the rack system, reduce your rack size and the refrigerant load and everything, your BTUs that are on the rack, change that deli system over to without having a full store interruption. And then if you phase that through the store, where you go into the meat department and then the dairy department and then the frozen food department, it's a spaced out, more affordable, less impact on the customer. So really it's managing how do you go through that. And do you have the technician training? Do you have technicians to install it? Do you have technicians to service it? Is the capability there? In our larger refrigeration partners, we have that capability. They don't service all of our areas, so we've got smaller refrigeration partners that don't service CO2 systems. Managing that whole puzzle and doing it affordably. You've got a store that's on the bubble of making money year over year, and you've got to invest $3 million on a refrigeration system to stay in that community, yet make that investment. It's a hard manage. We're trying to make sure that we're making the right decision for our employees for the customers, and for the environment.
Is that module technology, both you and Keely mentioned it, is it available now? Can you buy that off the shelf now?
Yes. Yeah. And our company, on our portion company, we have not used any of that technology yet. We're actually scoping right now for some changes to that. So, but it is in use in other retailers.
I was reading over the legislation and I saw that, regulating down to 15 pounds and actually the 53 GWP, which to me says like, hey, any HFC, it's got to be a natural refrigerant or it's going to be regulated.